Thanks for joining us Behind the Frontline, a podcast providing timeless solutions to everyday workforce and workplace challenges. Frontline Training Solutions is an express employment professionals company, strategically placed between the workplace and the workforce with professionals standing by, ready to combat your unique challenges. Learn more about what we do at frontlineon.com. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Frontline, where I am joined in the studio today with Paul Stabile, who's our Director of Training Development here at Frontline Training Solutions. And we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into a webinar we just hosted last week. But Paul, before we get started, if you could just kind of introduce yourself. This is your first time on the podcast with me. So introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nick. So I'm Paul Stabile, Director of Training and Development here at Frontline. Been with the organization really only about 4 months, I think, since the beginning of March. Is when I joined, following a number of different things. So I was doing some independent consulting on my own, ran the learning and delivery platform for a boutique leadership development organization out of Chicago called DX Learning. I was with Fierce Conversations for a few years before that, and then spent many years at the Perigo Company down in Allegan in learning and development, helping to develop some global programs that we ran, and a number of different programs from pre-supervisory all the way up to high potential people at the manager and director level, and going all the way back to almost a 10-year stint with Gordon Foods. Starting way up in Sault Ste. Marie, where I'm from, and ending up down here and kind of moving things along as we go. So, developed a huge love for leadership, a huge love for psychology and how the brain works and everything. Really, a lot of it came out of, bear with me for a second, a very painful conversation that happened 30 years ago. I wanted to be a leader in the worst way possible.
Okay.
And I was, at the time, an assistant manager at a location. And one day, the regional manager walks up and says, "Paul, got a great opportunity for you. We have a store that's struggling. We want to help it get over the hump. There's an opportunity for you." And I thought, you know what? This is great. Make a name for myself, provide for my family, move up the corporate ladder. And so I took the position, worked it hard. I mean, sunrise to sunset, nights, weekends, holidays, you name it, I was working it, and financially got it to turn around. A couple weeks later, we get a memo across the line saying the district that we're in was growing at a really rapid pace, so they needed to split it off and have management teams for each of the districts. I thought, again, next logical progression. Move up the corporate ladder, provide for my family, make a name for myself, applied for it. My leader came into the store a couple weeks later, said, "Hey, Paul, here's all the things we're looking for on this list. You check off every box on the list. We can't consider you for the role." Okay. How about some feedback? He's like, "Absolutely. We talked to your store sales associates. We talked to your assistant managers. We talked to some of the other managers in the district. Here's what we found. Nobody likes you."
Wow.
You can laugh now, and most people do when I tell that story. At the time, painful as all get out. But here's the thing. I wanted to be a leader in the worst way possible, and I was. My leadership style was do this, do this, do this, do it again, do this, do it faster, do this, do this. Did you do it again yet? I doo-dooed my way all the way to what I thought was success.
Yeah.
Forgetting that people were a part of the process.
Yeah.
And so that one conversation changed everything in me. Again, I started studying leadership. I studied psychology, studied all these things, and it's just been a driving factor ever since.
Wow. I've never heard the phrase doo-doo before in leadership development, but I'm definitely going to use that one. So Paul is such an engaging speaker and thought leader, and it's definitely someone you want to come in your organization. And we did this webinar this last week on what you really need to know about generations. And I told him right when the webinar concluded that it was probably the most engaging webinar that we've had. And we've done 60, 70 of them in the last 5 years. So good job on that. So I'm looking forward to today's podcast episode. But I was hoping, go watch the webinar on our website. We have so many archived webinars there. It's so much information that you could use to help your team, to help your organization, to help yourself as a leader. But today we're talking about generations. We're going to go a little deeper into this webinar. So before we kick off, why don't you just describe what the webinar was about, some of the main talking points, and we'll go from there. We even have some drawings that we had people submit, and we'll talk about those a bit.
Yeah. So really, the main thing is, what do you need to know? There's 4, some people say 5 generations at play in the workplace right now. How do we make it all work? And the thing is, my main talking point, broken record, but that's the hill I'm going to die on, is that we're focusing too much on the generational differences. There's a lot of data, and sure, there's some norms within each generation. There are some preferences from each generation because the world's constantly changing. So people are coming into different worlds, different environments, different norms, and everything. How do we adjust to those? And instead of putting a label on someone, you're a millennial, I'm a baby boomer. Great, there's pluses and minuses to all that. The big thing is that as a leader, we just need to ask better questions.
That's true.
It's not, okay, you're this generation, so I need to do this. It's, hey, Nic, what do I need to give you from a leadership perspective that will allow you to be your very best? And that was the whole thing. There's a lot of great research out there. Totally get that. We're putting way too much emphasis on it. I'm the king of oversimplification. I mean, if it's an easy way to do it, that's what I want to find and move forward in. And the easy way to do it is just to say, what do you need to be your best? I don't care when you were born. I don't care what label you have. I need to understand what you need from me to do your best work.
That's so true. Yeah, that's so true. So we have these drawings here. So describe what we did in the webinar and then what we had people do.
So we were trying to prove the point that needs from people and performance and output is not based on the generation. It's based on what you get from your leader. So we had you play the role of the leader, and we had some people at home that played along, and we said, okay, draw this. You gave us instructions to draw a flower. All right? And so we have 3 Gen X's, 1 Gen Z, and 1 Millennial. And I know you're going to blow these up.
Yeah,
and
I'm going to put these on the screen
here,
so you can see them better.
And there's some similarities, but there's differences all the way around. All the way to the one in front. That's a horrible drawing, which I will take great credit for. It's not because I'm a baby boomer. It's just because I'm a horrible drawer.
Yeah.
And I went very explicit with your instructions. You said draw a stick or a line from the bottom of the page to the top of the page. I did exactly that explicitly. And then at the top, draw a circle. I drew the smallest circle I could possibly draw because I knew where we were going on this. Some people drew bigger circles, some do medium-sized circles. But so we had a variance in output. And in business, a variance in output is not a good thing. So could we blame that on the generation? No. We can blame that on the interpretation or on the quality of the information that was being fed to the people who were actually doing the task.
Yeah.
So it wasn't generation-based. It was a clarity issue.
I will say that this is kind of going against your point, but it looks like the millennial was a bit more spot on there with my instructions.
And compared to the picture we showed on the screen,
it's pretty
very
exact.
spot on. Yeah.
It's pretty exact. Well, it was such a good webinar, and it was very eye-opening. We had so many positive comments on it, so please go watch it. But we're going to dive a little bit deeper today into the topic of generational differences, but mainly how leaders can help prepare themselves to lead their team more effectively, whether it's generational or not. But a lot of it's going to center around that idea of generational norms and differences and how we can come against that as leaders in teams. So in the webinar, you made the case that differences within generations are often greater than differences between them. Is there still a responsible way for leaders to use generational research without turning it into stereotyping? So,
yes and no. I'll say yes in that if the leader is very curious and is very clear on the curiosity, it is the big thing. We brought some younger people on, here. And I mean, we brought Anna Kinsman in to help us out with a drawing, and she's a Gen Z. And so I asked the question before we even started, can we do this? I want to, prove or disprove a point. And so will you be a part of this so we can say this is going to work or this is not going to work? All right. So that's the curiosity part there. It's not labeling. It's not trying to pigeonhole. It's just saying, I've got an experiment I want to run. Can you help me with this so we can prove or disprove a theory? Same thing when you're at work. If I've got someone new reporting to my team, and they're brand new, I could say as a leader, I think it'd be responsible to go, okay, so my interpretation of the way you like to receive information, the way your generation likes to receive information is this way. Help me understand. Does that work for you or not? Because I could be right, I could be wrong. Again, and I'm going to say this a million times, so I'm going to apologize in advance to everyone. My answer is going to be the same with some modifications throughout. The answer is what works best for you.
Yeah.
And I can qualify it, and I'm okay being wrong by saying, this is my interpretation. Help me understand if it's right. And if it's not, great. Tell me what is going to work the best so I can make the adjustment and make it work. So that's really the responsible way to lean into what you understand about generations But if you do it with curiosity and then ask, is this correct or not, then we're making it safe for them to go, yeah, I don't work that way.
Yeah.
I work this way. And so you're safe to be wrong initially because it's in that controlled environment, as opposed to just going ahead and executing as if you know what's right and then causing frustration and strife.
That's so true. That's so true. So I want to talk about some of the generational biases, and these aren't questions I gave you beforehand. I just had a few more. I want to talk a little bit about some of the generational biases. So what are some of the most common generational biases you still hear in the workplaces, and what damage can those assumptions create?
Yeah, so here's the biggest one. Again, I'm a baby boomer, so I hear it all the time. We are the stalling point when it comes to technology and progression. All right, I love technology. All right, I've got so many smart things in my house. You know, I try to smart up my house as best I possibly can because it really makes my life easier. You know, and so that's a big one. And I know a lot of people my age are offended by that because a lot of my friends are very tech savvy. I have a lot of friends who aren't very tech savvy, but also I know friends of my son and daughters who aren't very tech savvy either. And no one's calling them a boomer, you know, as we go around. So that's a big one, you know, and then I love the video clip we played.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to work anymore.
That was funny.
Wasn't that good?
Yeah, it was funny.
I mean, 90 seconds covering, 300 years, I think, of people quoted in different phases saying, nobody wants to work anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the biggest one that comes in. Anytime a generation comes that's younger than yours, you're going to see some norms, again, based on differences of the world and way we've evolved. And someone's invariably going to say, this younger generation just doesn't want to work.
Yeah. I tell you what, I'm going to play it right now.
A brief history of nobody wants to work anymore. A thread. 2022. Nobody wants to work. 2014. What has happened to the work ethic in America? 2006. It almost seems like nobody wants to work anymore. 1999. 1981. 1979. Nobody wants to work anymore. Disgruntled businessman. 1969. Nobody wants to work anymore. 1952. 1940. Nobody wants to work anymore. 1937. Nobody wants to work anymore. 1922. 1916. 1905, 1894. Nobody wants to work anymore.
There you go.
So it's all over the place. You know, like I said in the webinar, my dad heard it when he was a teen in the 50s. I heard it when I was a teen in the 70s. You know, I've said it to my kids when they were teens in the aughts and in the teens, in the 20 teens. And so it happens all the time. And then the other common ones, you know, younger generations don't know how to talk.
Right.
They don't know how to have conversations. You know, well, there could be some truth to that, but have we given them the right platform and really taught them how to do that?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, to be able to make it up. So everywhere you turn, there's going to be an assumption that's made. The danger is when we believe that assumption's true and don't get curious and ask the right questions.
You know, I love the point you made, and that we can't assume that they don't know how to communicate. I spent a huge part of my career looking at communication theory and the transactional model of communication and how we cut through noise by developing different standards and systems. And when you look at this generation, Gen Z, I mean, you made the point that they kind of grew up mostly in technology, whereas millennials were the one generation that kind of was introduced to technology. And the communication shift that's happened in the last 30 years alone is the biggest communication shift that happened since the printing press?
Yeah.
I mean, just the way that people absorb and communicate now. So, yeah, we can't make that assumption that they don't know how to communicate. We just don't know how they communicate.
Well, so baby boomers, the only way we would communicate was face-to-face. We didn't have technology like you have today. Okay, we didn't have the smartphones or chat messaging or anything like that. We had to walk in person and have that conversation that way. So it's not bad. It's just different.
It's different.
You know, it is the biggest thing. And, you know, one of the other fallacies, you know, millennials aren't loyal, you know, or I mean, any of the generations. I look at me personally, you know, this is my fourth organization since 2019. You know, am I disloyal? No, just see different opportunities and it fills a different need. And we do what's best for ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, in the old days, the industrial age, okay, before we got to the information age, it was typically assumed you would get a job, you would stay there forever. But that was also the era of everyone having a pension. Don't find that hardly at all anymore. Certain areas do, but a lot don't. And so it was to your advantage to stay somewhere forever and then retire. The world's totally different now.
That's true.
So you can't blame that on someone not being loyal or anything. It's what's going to work best for your family financially. So
that's true.
Those are mistaken labels.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. I've been here since 2020, and I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. But I do have my own business on the side, and we have to do what's best for our family sometimes. But I've definitely even had the assumption sometimes when it comes to Gen Z and working remote of they're just being lazy. And so when we label employees as lazy, entitled, resistant, or difficult, what questions should we be asking ourselves before deciding the problem belongs to the employee?
Yeah, and that's a great one, Nick, because the question we really need to be asking is of ourselves. What am I doing or not doing that's causing this behavior to make it work? I mean, look, when COVID hit and we all had to go to working remote, I absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
I'm a little type A. I thrive on engagement and all these conversations, and I'm like, this is going to just absolutely kill me. After a while, I hated the thought of going back into an office.
You got comfortable.
Yeah, I really did. Yeah. And I was more productive and all this sort of stuff. And there's pros and cons to everything. But yeah, so the whole lazy thing. All right. Define lazy. Is lazy, does it mean that you're not getting your work done on time? Or does lazy mean that I just don't see you, but things are getting done? Perception, reality. What are we looking at here? All these different things. That's the question. Is this my perception, or is this truly reality? And what am I basing it on? There are some old school leaders who say you can't be effective if you're not in the office engaging with other people. Well, I was blessed with some great leaders, even before COVID, that said, I don't care when you're here. I care that you get the job done. So if you get the job done and you're only here for 3-4 hours a day and you're working remotely or doing whatever else, God bless you, because I just want the work to get done. So that's the question. Are you being lazy, or are you just being very effective without being seen being effective? And then from a communication standpoint, are you dismissive of communication, or are you just not communicating in the way that I really like and I'm really used to? It's all assumptions. Are we putting data behind it, and do we have good, hard, solid data to say, okay, this might be an issue? Or are we just really kind of leaning into our preferences as a leader and going, well, you've got to meet my preferences in order for this to be really effective. So am I causing this by making the assumptions and really pulling the blinders in and going, this is the way I want to work and the way I see the world, and everyone has to conform to that? Or is there another way to build a better mousetrap that makes everybody happy?
Wow. Yeah. Why do you think people are so willing to excuse their behavior or their generation's behavior while judging the same behavior more harshly in other generations?
So we talked about fundamental attribution error. All right. If I make a mistake in leading you, in doing pretty much anything, it's because something else caused it. Okay, it can't be me being wrong or not working well for someone. It's got to be some external thing that caused it to happen. Where if you did it, that's a character flaw in you. I would know better. You should know better. So there's something wrong with Nick. We're not willing to take the blinders, peel back a layer and go, could I have done something wrong? Could this really be me?
Yeah.
No one wants to admit that they're infallible when we are. All right. And just, again, in my Pollyannish world, we're all perfectly imperfect. And we have to accept that fact to make that work. But we just don't like admitting that.
He's making me drink my own hot tea right now. I was driving in this morning and I got cut off big time. And when I finally saw who it was definitely a boomer lady. And I had all of the assumptions in my head. But it's true. We're all imperfect. And I could have easily done the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And we could have just said, okay, that was a really dumb move. I'll let you have the road. We're just going to move on. I'm not going to give you the power to ruin my day as we go through. But that fundamental attribution error comes in all the time.
Yeah. Wow. You encourage leaders in the webinar to ask, and you just mentioned this a few minutes ago, what do you need from me to do your best work? And I really love that. That's a strong, coaching open-ended question there too. What happens when an employee's preferred way of working conflicts with the needs of the team or the organization?
Yeah, that's a great one, and that's one I think that people worry about the absolute most. And so, look, there are things that we can't accommodate. All right, there's legal things obviously that we have to make sure we're accommodating. There are some personal preferences that we might not be able to. Okay, be very strong and very clear in your why. Here's why we can't. Not just because I don't like it that way, but more as, okay, here's why this is not going to be able to work for us.
Clarity.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. When I'm leading someone brand new, I will sit down and say, okay, look, here's my preferred leadership style. All right, again, king of oversimplification. I want to give you some clarity, and then I want to give you the freedom to build a better mousetrap. Because I think, you've got knowledge, experience, and abilities and everything that you've transferred over from wherever you were before. I want to give you the ability to put those into play and make it work. I may make the error, though, in giving you way too much autonomy with not enough clarity. And so I need to make sure that I'm very clear up front. Or I may say, I don't think you've done this before. I want us to check in really, really regular on this right at the very beginning to make sure we're getting off on the right foot. That's not my norm, so I don't want you to think I'm micromanaging. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you exactly what you need and not giving this a chance to go off the rails. Because once we learn a bad behavior, we have to unlearn those behaviors before we learn the right behaviors. And so what may seem like micromanaging is just me ensuring I'm getting things right with you. But I'm going to say, at the very beginning, my norm is to just hands off, let you go ahead and do it. Let's start this way just to make sure we're both comfortable and on the same way.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. What are my norms? What are my expectations? How does this align with you? Can we find that common ground on there? And if we can, great. But if we can't, let's be really solid. And again, data-based basically as to here's why we can't operate that way. And I would say yet. There's always an opportunity to change, to modify things. So for the short term, we can't operate that way. Here's why. Let's revisit it after a while and see if we can make some modifications.
Do you believe that style of coaching leadership when it comes to each individual person, whether regardless of their generation, do you feel that adapting to each individual can create inconsistency or the perception that certain employees are receiving special treatment?
So in life, there's risk and there's risky. All right. There's risk in walking across the street. It's risky if I'm doing it blindfolded.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing with giving people what they need. Here's the thing, though, Nick. If you as an individual are getting what you need from me, you're likely not paying any attention to what anyone else is getting because your needs are being met. I've done a great example of this many times. I'll just give it to you right now. Say you're leading a team. You've got two brand new people, or not brand new people. You have two people on your team. All right. You have a goal for each of them. It's the exact same goal. All right. They have to enter 25 clients into the CRM by the end of the week. Okay. You've got an hour of your time to divide between those two people. Okay. Based on just that information alone, how would you divide that hour of your time? Let's say option A is 50 minutes for the first person, 10 minutes for the second person. Option C is 50-50. Option E is 10 minutes for the first person and 50 minutes for the second person. Where would you go? Based off that little bit of information, what would you do?
I would probably choose C.
Okay, because there's a little bit of information, and it sounds like the right thing to do. I'm going to give you each 30 minutes of my time. So we have a conversation with them, and we understand what's going on. Person A is fairly new to the job, loves to bounce ideas off the leader to understand where things are going, and so really values that. Person B has been doing this for 7 years and just says, give me the goal, get the heck out of my way. Now you've got that same graph of time. 10 minutes for person A, 50 minutes for person C, 30-30, or 50 minutes for person A, 10 minutes for person B. Where would you go on that scale? It'd probably be different, wouldn't it? Exactly. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so as we do that, one person's getting a lot of time, one person's getting a little time. Do they care what the other person's getting? No, because they're getting what they need to be their very best. So there's risk in doing that. It's risky if you're not saying why. And if I'm giving somebody more attention than another person, I'm going to tell them why. They haven't done this before, or they have some special needs in this area, or whatever. This is highly complex, where the question back to them is, are you getting what you need? Mm-hmm. And if you are in a very short amount of my time and the other person needs more of my time, I would say more often than not, they're not going to care because they're getting what they need. And this goes up and I'm happy and the world is great.
Yeah.
As opposed to, why are they getting more of your time?
Yeah. I think that falls back to, too, just the clarity, just being clear. You know, I've dealt with so many leaders in the past that will just say things like, well, that's just the way it is. Like, well, you know why it is. Like, be clear with somebody.
Yeah.
You know, like tell them why, be transparent with them. And I love you even talked in the webinar about psychological safety. And we have had other conversations with other leaders in the past about creating psychological safety and just the level of vulnerability. What does productive vulnerability look like for a leader? And when can a leader overshare in a way that actually reduces confidence or trust?
Yeah, that's a great one. So from a productive part, okay, I am going to work with my team or with my peers to say, okay, just a level set. This is what I'm really good at. This is what I'd love to do. This is what I'm good at. Here's where I'm not so great. You know, I'm a big idea guy. I'm a motivation, inspirational type of guy. I'm not the guy to put the project plan in play and follow it through a Gantt chart or anything like that. That's not my strength. That's not my passion. That's not what I do well. I'm going to share that right off the bat, hoping that somebody goes, oh, I really like doing that. You know, I mean, Mike Lee, he and I worked together for many years at Perigo. We fit really well like that. Mike is the process guy. Okay. And I am the idea guy and I will execute and do all that sort of stuff. And it works really well. That's where it's very productive as we go through. When it gets unproductive is when you are so transparent, you start talking about people and behaviors and things that bug you, or you bring too much of the personal into it. You know, and then it's like, okay, where are we at? What lines are we crossing? How is this helping me be more productive at what I do? Or how is this helping me get the right support from you, you know, to be able to do it? I love a leader to say, yeah, you know what? The process they're having us follow, I'm kind of frustrated with this. Let's follow this through. And then later on, let's see what we can do to make it better, as opposed to complaining about that darn VP. Every single time we do something, they get in the way and, you know, throw a monkey wrench in it. That's not good transparency.
Right.
You know, to be able to do it. Will it help humanize me in your eyes? Will it help us work better together? That's good, productive transparency and vulnerability. When it gets to personal opinions and gets too deep, then it's not going to help us.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I echo you too. I'm not a Gantt chart process person. I'm not. I try to be, but I'm not. No, I'm the kind of guy that, you know, if someone says connect these two sticks, I'm going to ask why, and then I'm going to find a few strategic, creative solutions very quickly. But I prefer the type of leader that gives me the task and then says make it happen. I don't care how you get there. Yeah. So I have the creative flexibility to do it. You know, we have so many different perspectives in the workplace and generational perspectives and, you know, even just experiential perspectives on teams. And I think that's what makes teams so valuable. But conflict can often increase when those perspectives are expressed. So how can leaders create genuine debate on teams without allowing disagreement to become personal or divisive?
Yeah. And so I love this. One of the things that when we were working, and I'll go back to my Perigo days, we did a lot of work in the manufacturing. It was their major manufacturing area. And so we wanted to look at everything as process and not person. Okay. If a deviation occurred, deviations are very bad in any industry. It doesn't matter. If a deviation occurred, then I want to go back and look at, okay, what was the process that the person happened to follow that didn't work for us? Where was the flaw in the process? And so you can apply this to generation. You can apply this to anything. Let's look at the data. Data's the big thing. You know, that's where the answer all lies in is the data. That data doesn't lie. Numbers don't lie. So we look at the data and we go, okay, what was the process that we followed that produced that specific result? And then let's go back and improve the process. All right. The person was just following a process. They didn't go into it going, I'm going to mess this up purposely. Okay. People don't get up in the morning and say they're going to do that.
I'm going to set the world on fire today.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't happen. So, all right, something happened in the process. A step was missed. Something was misunderstood. Great. I don't care what generation you are. What's the process we followed? What can we do to improve the process? What corrective actions can we put in place to ensure that that's not going to happen again? And that's it. Where we get into trouble again is when we say, oh, well, it's because this generation did this. Well, it's because of a process that was followed that may or may not have worked. So let's take a look at that. Divide person from process, focus on the process, and we'll find solutions to be able to fix the process.
Wow. It really sounds like we need to be more intentional as leaders and intentional with the processes and stuff. In the webinar, you suggested intentionally bringing different generations together. So what separates effective cross-generational mentoring from a relationship built on the assumption that the older employee teaches the younger employee and the younger employee has to listen? I mean, we talked before the podcast started about reverse mentoring.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on just, I mean, we all know that there's a knowledge gap. So when the data doesn't lie. So a lot of the boomer generation is starting to retire. Gen Z is coming in, and in 5 years, Gen Alpha is going to be coming in. There's a huge knowledge gap when it comes to some of these jobs that we're doing. But the younger generation is also coming in with different tools, different styles of communication, different creative ways to get the job done. What are your thoughts on that?
Here's a simple question, Nick. Are you doing your job the exact same way now that you were doing 5 years ago?
No way. Absolutely
Bam.
not.
There it is. There's my mic drop moment there.
No, things change.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
That's the answer. Yes, I, as a boomer, have a lot of life experience, a lot of experience in different industries and things like that. That's great. But, since the invention of computers, our information generations are turning around so much quicker. You start a 4-year degree right now at a university. By the time you graduate, more than half the information you learned is useless or has changed. Okay, so now we need to take advantage of that. We need reverse mentoring in a really big way. Pair up somebody who's Gen Z with a millennial, doesn't matter, all of that, and to say, okay, what have you done that's been successful? Older employee with newer employee, what are you doing right now? What's the latest trends? What's the latest technology? What's the latest things you're doing right now to make it work? Let's see how we can blend that together. It's not the person who's been here the longest mentors the brand new person. It's we're going to information share and make it very collaborative. But especially reverse mentoring. Yeah, here's the hot new technology. Here's whatever that's making it all work. I just want to make sure you're familiar with it. And then can we modify that to what you've been doing and get the best of both worlds to make it work? It's not that things we were doing 30 years ago are useless, but there's probably easier ways to do it, and we can make modifications to everything to make it work.
I think there's also, some timeless ideologies as well that really aren't going to change, when it comes to like things like curiosity. Obviously that's not something AI is going to replace in leaders. We need to be more curious. Or just, I'm sure in some manufacturing plants, there's the best way, the best tool to use to turn the right bolt or whatever it is.
Until there isn't.
Until
there's a better one.
Yeah.
I've done enough work in the manufacturing field to know that, even in those environments, even heavily federally regulated environments, they're not doing things the same way they were doing them 10 years ago.
Really?
Because they found different ways, different pieces of equipment, different processes to follow. Things are constantly changing. Even those things that we think are timeless. Look at, even automotive assembly lines, totally different. We've got robot arms now that can do all of this, and there's different ways to be able to do it. And so we've got to take advantage of, here's what worked before, here's new things here, how can we blend it together to make it work best for everyone?
So I think it's easy for leaders of teams and just organizational leaderships, whether it's C-suite or someone new to the team, Gen Z. I think it's easy to manage people or work with people based on assumptions rather than curiosity. What's the first conversation that managers should be having with their team to help cross those generational biases, build trust amongst their team? What kind of conversation should they be having?
Yeah, I love this in a group setting. Just get a whiteboard out and say, how do you like to communicate? How do we communicate best? As a leader, here's my norms. I'm going to go first. Okay, here's my norms. I'm willing to be flexible. I have to as a leader to make sure it works for all of you. Let's just go down the line. Who prefers a quick Teams chat? Who prefers a text? Who prefers face-to-face? Let's really, kind of put all these together and see what we can do to modify all of our styles to make sure we're meeting all these needs. And let's create team norms to be able to work well that way. So let's start and just, again, make a list, figure out what's going to work, and then be very clear on, okay, here's the things that we all decided on doing. We're all agreeing to do it this way, and let's really establish good, solid, agreed upon team norms and hold ourselves able, if you will, to doing that. I don't like saying accountable because that word has a very bad name behind it. No one wakes up in the morning and says, gee, I hope I'm held accountable for something today. So let's hold them able to be able to do it. I believe you are all able to abide by these agreed upon team norms as to how we're going to communicate, or as to how we're going to run meetings, how we're going to do this, that, or the other thing. But let's just get it right out in the open right from the very beginning. I'm not going to look at it from a generational label. I'm going to look at it from all the individuals on our team collectively. How can we make this work best for everybody?
Oh, that's so good. That's a great perspective from a manager's point. What about from an employee's point of view? What responsibility do employees have to challenge their own assumptions about leaders and coworkers from different generations?
So there's the psychological safety part.
Yeah.
Am I as a leader making it safe for you to say, this really isn't working for me? I need more of this from you, or can we try this certain thing? Amy Edmondson, in her book, The Fearless Organization, defines psychological safety as the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So I, as an employee, can raise my hand at any time and go, I don't think this is right. Or I think we should do this another way or whatever, and not have to worry about retribution. We're getting something thrown at them, or people, just getting frustrated and everything. My oversimplified version is you have psychological safety when there's a lot of noise in the best possible way coming from the team. People are asking about different things. They're asking for feedback. They're giving you feedback. They're asking the why and why not questions and what if questions. And when all that's happening, I'm like, yeah, we got things working really well. I get nervous when I walk into a team and their heads down working and no one's making a sound. And I'm thinking, okay, do you feel safe to really say what's on your mind, or are you covering your backside because you just don't want to get into trouble? And so I have to ensure that as a leader, I'm making it safe for someone to say, hey, Paul, can we try something this way? Or can I try this way of operating as opposed to this way to see if it's going to work? I welcome those thoughts, welcome those ideas, and it's our responsibility as a leader to make it safe for people to go, I think we can do it different, or I may need it different. Can we try this?
Yeah.
And that's the way. And, again, risk and risky. If your leader's not providing that, sure, is there risk in bringing it up to their attention? Yeah, but if you do it the right way, it's okay. And just say, I'm struggling with how we're doing this process. I think there's a better way. Can we try this?
Yeah.
And hopefully the wise leader's going to listen to them and say, oh, well, let's dive into that a little further and figure it out. So
I love everything you just said. And it really got me thinking about disc profile. And I wonder if, because you don't like people with their heads down. Obviously, in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, that's just a bunch of C's and D's. I don't know if that is necessarily a generational thing, but if it falls in psychological safety. So my question is what generational biases affect decisions around hiring, promotions, development opportunities, team building, succession planning? What maybe biases, but also what are some positive generational things that we should be looking for when we're hiring a team?
Yeah, that's a great one. Obviously, the default is to think that someone brand new is very well versed and very up on technology and everything. Okay, I'm going to welcome that, but again, I'm going to look at it blindly. You've seen all the studies about the blind interviews, and I love the orchestra ones where they take everything away and say, listen to the music. How well can they perform this piece? And then figure out who this is. Or, look at the resume, strip away the names and all this stuff. Look at the work product and just listen to the answers they give you to make it work. There's biases that come into play in a lot of these things. So the best we can be at stripping away those potential biases and ask the questions and truly listen for the answers and everything. That's going to make it a level playing field.
Yeah.
We can go into it and say, okay, you've been doing this a long time, and again, ask the database questions. How do you apply this? What's your approach to this to see if that fits the vision of the role, where we want the role to be and everything? But the work, the data, that all has to be behind it, far and above the generation that they come from. Because people are going to surprise you. And let's give them a chance to surprise you in the best possible way. So strip all that away and just go, okay, here's what I'm hiring for. Here's what I need. Here's what the performance history has been. Who's going to be the best for the job? Who's going to be the best for the promotion? I don't care how old they are. I want to know who's performed the best and who's going to fit the vision and really help us move forward the best possible way.
Yeah.
So we have to strip all that away. Hard to do. I get that. But the better we can do that, the better things are going to work.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. What do you think is one generational belief that workplaces and managers need to retire completely?
Oh God. Well, I mean, I'll be biased by this because of my age, but it's for me, I don't know. Actually, there's a bunch of them that really weigh equally. For me, it's the boomers are the stalling point in technology. Because here's the thing: we developed most of that technology.
Yeah, that's true.
Bill Gates is responsible for a lot of technology that everyone's taken advantage of. Michael Dell, big computers, and all of that. So, but the fact that the younger generations, they're not loyal. They don't know how to communicate.
Lazy.
Lazy.
I think that could be retired.
Yeah, and it really needs to be. All of them really. Because we saw in the webinar, the younger the generations got, the more negative the comments were. And it was really,
that is so true. Yeah,
it was scary.
Yeah,
how the youngest generation there was just being drilled by everybody.
Yeah, even people in the comments were saying that was kind of hurtful to read.
Yeah, so we need to just get rid of all of those and just wipe the slate clean. If it's not something that you grew up with, sure, it's going to be foreign and it could be scary, and we could put a negative spin to it, or we could be curious about it and hopefully use it to our advantage.
I think that's the key. Curiosity. There's so many assumptions that we can make that are just outright hurtful. They are, and it's not true. And maybe they see things differently. Younger generations, maybe they see it differently, where their priorities have shifted.
Yeah.
Generational priorities have definitely shifted over the last 20 years for what we value and what we see as important and what we see disappearing in front of our eyes, and knowing that for some, the American dream is just not going to be possible, even though we work our butts off in order to get there. So priorities have definitely shifted for a lot of people. But I think curiosity is the main thing. I love that word so much, and I think we could have a whole conversation just on the idea of being curious. I made it one of my core values, just the idea of curiosity. And what's one thing leaders can do or step into? Maybe it's around curiosity, maybe it's around something else, but from your perspective, what's one thing leaders can do or step into or take this week to begin to change the mindset on their team around generations and biases and norms?
Yeah. Ask better questions.
Boom. Yeah.
That plain and simple. Here's what I think I'm seeing. Am I right? What's going on there? And again, the big one, what do you need from me to be your very best? I don't know how many people have been asked that question. The ones who have, they know, they felt it, they understand it, they've responded positively to it. Most people have not been asked that question. Ask that question. Just do that one thing for me. When you have a one-on-one with your people, just ask, what do you need from me to be your very best? Not, am I giving you what you need to be your best? Because if you don't have psychological safety, they're going to say, oh yeah, you're fine. But what do you need from me specifically to be your best at what we're doing? And if they say nothing, go, really, there's nothing I can do better? I'm going to challenge that assumption. They're probably going to come up with something.
Yeah.
Ask that one question. Please ask that one question. It's amazing the doors that will open to that and how much good that can do.
Yeah, I love that. Ask better questions. Don't make assumptions. We have lots of trainings at frontlineon.com that we host here, whether they're in person or virtual or on site, that have to deal with leadership and asking the right questions and becoming a better coaching leader, and just even flipping the mirror back on yourself and how am I leading effectively and not making assumptions on people. And so Paul teaches a couple of them. So we would love for you to go explore those. If you want to ask us any questions about, anything that you learned in this episode or the webinars or something you read on the website, or how we can help your team become better employees and better teams and better leaders, we'd love to help you. We'd love to talk with you. Please reach out to us. You can talk to Paul directly. Go watch the webinar. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
This was great.
Thank you. Call me.
Call him. So here at Frontline Training Solutions, we develop people, we inspire growth, and we unlock
potential.
Slipped my mind. That's the millennial in me. All right, so we're challenging generational norms here. So thanks for joining us on the front line. We'll see you next time.